Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm Lydia Elliott. I'm part of the SME Climate Hub team. And today we'll be really focusing on measurement tools and how to get the new measurement tools we have in the SME Climate Hub and how to get started measuring emissions. And you can see up on the slide the speakers for today. Everyone will introduce themselves as we go to their sections, but we've got speakers from We Mean Business Coalition, which is where I work and is the host of the SME Climate Hub, and then from two of our partners who provide the free carbon calculators on the hub, Equipoise and Emitwise. So as part of the agenda today, I'm going to give you a really short introduction to the SME Climate Hub. Some of you will know it already, so we'll keep it really short, but I just want to make sure that anyone joining, if you don't know so much about us, just knows a bit about the tools and how we're going to put them in context. And then we'll run through each of the tools for you. So putting it up on screen, doing a little demo, a deep dive, and then leaving lots of time at the end for Q&A and for us to answer any questions that come up. As we go through, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and that way we can see them and answer them all at the end of the session. So I'll get started with a little bit of background on the SME Climate Hub. Really, the SME Climate Hub aims to help small and medium-sized businesses to take climate action, and we do that in a few ways. So one is having a set of free tools and resources and guidance to help businesses start measuring their emissions, getting ideas for actions that can be taken, and really embedding climate action into their business strategy. Then we also have two other pieces. One is a commitment to net zero, and this is a simple, credible public commitment that links into the UN Race to Zero campaign. And this is just a way for small businesses to demonstrate their ambition and also join lots of other bigger players in that campaign. So big multinationals, cities, regions who are all saying we want to reach net zero and we're all working on it together. And then the third part of what we do is really linked to that commitment and all about reporting progress. So that's really focused on how particularly committed SMEs can report progress on their climate action and how they're reducing their emissions. But today we're going to be talking a lot more about action, and I'll show you a bit about our action space, which is where all these tools live. So we launched it last year, and it really brings together all the different tools that we have, both within the SME Climate Hub and partners tools as well, that are kind of aimed at SMEs or really small business appropriate that we've reviewed. And it puts it into one place. It's based around kind of three core topics: business basics, which is all about what it means for your business, and that includes things like measurement and target setting. And then operational emissions, which is all about how you implement reductions and actions within your operations. And then supply chain emissions, which is going out to suppliers, thinking about how you reduce emissions within your supply chains. And then lots of other deep dive topics to everything from financing some of these climate actions to circularity and product design. So if you look at one of the action space areas, business basics, you can see that it pulls together all of our different tools, resources, courses, action guides into one place, and they kind of ladder up in terms of maturity. So they start off and kind of building and understanding the basics, and then as a business gets more mature, we'd expect them to move down the kind of ladder of resources. So in this case, starting with carbon calculators, beginning to understand emissions, and then moving down towards target setting, and then reporting and financing. So really what it aims to do is try to make it really clear and simple how you might move through some of these steps. And what we'll be focusing today is really on the carbon calculator part of the action space in the hub. We've recently, just this year, launched 3 new carbon calculators, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. It's often the first step we see businesses in our community taking. We survey our community of committed SMEs and tools users every year, and in the most recent survey, 78% of the businesses had calculated their emissions. It's often a very useful first step. It's a step that can help take some of the fuzziness out of climate action and begin to say, okay, well, now I know what the hotspots are for my business, what the areas that we really need to work on are, and start to move it from a kind of theoretical idea to actually beginning to allocate time and resources against different actions that could be taken. And before we dive into the kind of demos and the calculators, I wanted to just take a step back, just in case there are people on the call who aren't so familiar with some of the technical jargon that we're going to be using in terms of measuring your greenhouse gas emissions. So as everybody demos, they're probably going to use these words. So I just wanted to explain what they were up front. So emissions, measuring your greenhouse gas emissions as a business is typically split into scopes. So scope one are your direct emissions. They're emissions from sources your organization owns or controls. So, for example, on-site equipment or fuel burned in company vehicles. Scope two is indirect energy, so emissions from purchased energy. So, for example, purchased electricity. And then scope three is the most complex of all of them. It's emissions from external activities. It brings together lots of different things into one place, which is why it's so complicated when you look at it. It's actually lots of different pieces, and it includes things like travel, business travel, commuting, supply chains, things you buy, all of those sorts of things. So scope three is really the one that often I think is the most hard to get your head around all the different things it's talking about. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Dan to go through the 3 free calculators we have on the hub and just give you a bit more background and information, and then do a deep dive into one of them.
Brilliant. Hi everyone, I'm Dan. I'm our Net Zero Action Manager at the SME Climate Hub. I'm going to run through, give a quick overview of the different calculators, but I won't go into too much detail because you'll have separate demos on each of them. And if there are any questions, do use the Q&A function, and we've left a lot of time at the end to go through them. But as you'll be able to see, we now on the SME Climate Hub offer 3 unique carbon measurement solutions, each one tailored to different SMEs for different purposes. The first one, which I'll be running through in a second, is the Small Business Carbon Calculator. This is a more simple and accessible calculator for smaller businesses who have started on their journey and perhaps only operate over one site. We then have Equipoise's Advanced Business Carbon Calculator, which is a more comprehensive, transparent, and also auditable calculator, which is more suitable for medium to larger sized businesses, and also provides users with the ability to incorporate data from multiple sites. And then we finally have Emitwise's Scope 3 specific calculator. So this is an intuitive platform that can take very simple procurement and spend-based data and turn it into accurate and quality checked Scope 3 emissions data, and allows you to basically get your head around your Scope 3 emissions and identify hotspots among your suppliers as well. I'm now going to share my screen. So I've posted this in the chat, but this page here is the page you'll arrive at if you're looking to engage with the calculator. So it outlines each of them, includes some details, and also has a comparison table to help you identify perhaps which one is best suited to your needs. But as for the SME Climate Hub Small Business Carbon Calculator, which you would select by clicking Start Now, but I'll navigate to this page here. This is where you'll land once you access the calculator. As you'll be able to see, it will preload information you provide because before accessing it, you'll be asked to register as a tools user with the SME Climate Hub, which is, as all these calculators are, completely free. You just need to provide your email address, business name, and some other details such as the sector it's in and number of employees. But once it's done, you'll arrive at this page where you can then start basically creating a report. So you can either create a new report by report like an emissions calculations, or you can select from existing ones if you've already used one, go back and view or even edit them. For the sake of time, so we're not filling in data fresh, I'm going to freeload an existing report and go back a bit. So if you were to select create new report, this is where you'd land. So we've got a couple of guidance pages up front that explain what sort of information you would need to gather, such as business data like number of employees or heating electricity costs, or kind of later on in the calculator, company expenses, and some final information, just general guidance around whether you the fact that the more information you provide, the more accurate it will be, and so on. You'll then start adding the actual data. So we'll start off with some basically asking what the reporting period is. You can choose a very specific set of dates, or you can just select the previous financial year or the last calendar year and have an option to edit the name of your report. And then it will start off with your company data. So details such as you can see around number of employees, what proportion of the time these employees work from home, because that will be incorporated into calculations as well. And you'll see here for each of the kind of data collection pages, we'll have details on why we're asking for this, a link to our FAQ, and also tips on where you can access this data. For example, here, recommending you speak to your HR team or your management team who could provide that information. You can also see along here where you are in the process, and you have the option to save and exit and come back to it. Or carry on asking for company data, such as the revenue for the period. There's a drop-down menu here, so throughout you can change the units as well. And then we'll start moving on to more specific data. For example, this one isn't quite filled in at the moment, but you around your total company's area for your facilities. You also have the option to opt out for these ones if you don't own or lease any facilities. And then you just kind of fill each of the categories out. So as you can imagine, it asks information on electricity you've consumed, heating you've consumed, including where that's come from as well. And I'll start moving on to more details, such as any vehicles you own or lease for the period, again, giving you an option to provide the units and edit them as well. Any company or any machinery you've used as a company and fuel you've consumed as a result of that. Again, there's an option to select no if you don't do any of that. And then we'll start moving on to what we refer to for scope 3 emissions. So starting with business travel, and also commuting as well as hotel stays. What you'll notice here for business travel and commuting, it can be quite complicated information to pull together. So we have got action guides you can link out to understand how to get that information. But if you haven't started capturing this yet, you can also select that with this tick box here, and it'll let you progress and calculate your emissions without that information. The final data entry category is around company expenses. So up top, you'll be asked for your total expenditure. And then across these categories, these 4 categories, so transport and freight, materials and inventory, capital goods, business services, you can enter specific expenditures for these as well. And again, there's not a requirement to do this, but the more you do, the more accurate the emission calculations will be at the end. And it'll also indicate here what your coverage is like as well, so you have an idea of how accurate it might be at the end. But once you've done that, you can select next. You'll have this final report page, so you can double check everything's complete, and you've got the option to go back to it as well. There's also an option just to delete the report, so you can start again if you wish. And then you can calculate. And then after a few seconds, the report will be generated. So you can see here the total tons of CO2 in your emissions, and in the breakdown here in the pie chart, but also here on the right by scope as well. And there's an option to select the drop down, and you can see exactly where those emissions come from within those scopes as well. And there's also an option to then download this report as well as a PDF, so you can then share it externally and use it however you wish. You can also as mentioned before, delete it. But there's also an option to cycle between your previous reports as well. So you can access and edit them at any point, and also an option to go back and edit any data as well. I'll stop there because we want to move on to the other demos. But again, do put any questions in the Q&A. And I'm now going to hand over to Luke, who is going to provide an intro for their Advanced Business Carbon Calculator.
Thank you, Dan. Really good demo there. And I'll just start with a little bit about Equipoise. My name is Luke. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Equipoise. We are a specialist sustainability consultancy with a mission to rebalance our planet and society through corporate sustainability action. And it's brilliant to see so many SMEs and other organizations on the call here today. We really feel that SMEs have a lot of power to actually drive change, because you're small, flexible organizations who can often do things a lot better and a lot faster than large organizations. And yeah, we really like working with you guys, and we really like to approach it with a technology-enabled approach, which enables us to maximize impact while minimizing cost. So creating tools like the free calculators that you're seeing today. I'll tell you a little bit more about our services as well for SMEs. If you go to the next slide, please, Mark. Amazing. So as well as working with large organizations, Equipoise work directly with SMEs. We support with carbon measurement, so the free calculator tools you can see. We also have premium version of those tools with additional functionality that one day we may put into the free tools. I'm sure we've got lots of questions about additional functionality, but we have tools already which have things like activity-based emissions estimates for supply chain emissions, product carbon footprinting, and also carbon footprint verification. We also help SMEs with the next step after measurement, which is usually target setting with science-based targets, and also creating net zero strategies. We know that the UK is quite a big user of the free tools, so carbon reduction plans that need to be put in place for the UK government is something that we're very comfortable with helping SMEs on. And also when SMEs are ready to go beyond just looking at net zero, and creating a more holistic ESG strategy, we do a lot of work on that as well, and also helping organizations comply with different regulations like CBAM with our consultants. And then finally, since many SMEs are usually at the start of their journey, training is very important, training for the people responsible for sustainability in the organization, and also training for your suppliers and the other colleagues that you have, and trying to get them engaged and on board with making a change. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Pat now, who's going to talk you through the Advanced Business Carbon Calculator.
Hi, everybody. And yeah, firstly, thank you very much for making the time to come today. Thanks also to SME Climate Hub and the We Mean Business Coalition for holding the session, which is really exciting to see how much engagement there's been, both in terms of these sessions and also just how many people are clearly using these calculators, which is really fabulous to see. So I'm going to talk through a little bit the difference between the first two calculators by showing you through the advanced carbon calculator. Back on the main page here in the start measuring page, you have the second option here, which is the advanced business carbon calculator. You can see there's a little bit of information as to who it's best for. I saw there was a question about what's best for multi-site businesses. Well, this is the one to use for that sort of thing. As you'll see, it covers the ability to have multiple offices, multiple geographies. It's also completely transparent, so you see line by line all of the emissions that happen that are being recorded and calculated, what the source of those emission calculations are. So it's very useful for auditing, for using in any framework. Both of the tools, all the tools that you see here today are based on the GHG protocol, which makes them ready to go for most things. But you'll see sort of the difference between what Dan took you through and this calculator now. So to get started, you simply click Start Now. You can have a look at the video to be introduced, and then hit the Calculate button. You'll be taken to a sign up page. Once you've signed up, you'll be taken to this Google Sheet. We've built in Google Sheets because it's free for anyone to use. You don't need to have a software license to use this. while it also gives you all the advantages of having a spreadsheet-based approach whereby everything is kind of visible on the page as to what you're doing. It's very easy to cut and paste data into it, etc. All of those good things about spreadsheets. And yeah, it's quite easy for people to make it do what they need it to do. As you'll see straight away, there's a lot of information on the page, and it is useful, hopefully, to look at that. If you do get stuck at any point, though, while doing this, you can always go to the Equipoise Plus platform. There's links throughout, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what the Equipoise Plus platform is at the end, which is where you can go to get more information and ask questions such as the ones we're getting in today. So you'll see there's a bit of an overview here on this page. Let's dive into what you do once you've decided this is the right calculator for you. The first step is to start to define your facilities and workforce. So I'm going to take you across now to one which we baked up a little earlier with some sample data. So here, for example, is a multi-site business across these different offices across these different countries. A couple of things to note here is there's a bit more detail to put in here per office or facility. One of those details is to say which of the accounting approaches you'd like to use. Would you like to use a UK and rest of world approach or the US EPA specific approach? And you can choose that per site. There'll be small differences in how things are done, simply because the US labels things differently, so the data structure is slightly different, but the calculator is designed to handle either of those structures. So for example, say they have opened up a Milan office, this business, and they've taken a small managed office, 100 square feet, and they've got just the one employee to start with, and they're spending 50% of the time at home, 50% time in the office. You'll see immediately that you get the calculation straight away, and say that actually ends up being 2 employees, again, straight away. So you can put this data in, once you've got it, you can put it in for the time frame that's appropriate. You get to choose what that time frame is. So it's very flexible in how that happens. Then you go about filling out these tabs in a similar way that we saw Dan filling out the information in the calculator. I'll highlight the differences between them. For example, up and downstream transport and distribution is not covered in the small business carbon calculator, but is covered here. So say, for example, Sydney is shipping things. So we're actually shipping from Sydney. You can choose then what type of shipping you're doing, and you'll see that these drop downs populate, and you can say, okay, yeah, this was refrigerated cargo, and then we shipped, say we shipped 100 tons in a year, and the average distance of those was 1,000 kilometers. So that's 100,000 ton kilometers, and you'll immediately, again, you get an emission estimate, and you'll get the source from which that emission estimate has been driven. So in this case, the UK government provides emission estimations for shipping worldwide, and so we use that as the appropriate emission factor. Let's click through a few more. Again, you'll see here that I'll open up this one, which is business travel, which is often a high one for some business types. Here you can see how much more detail there is. You can choose long, short haul. You can choose the for each of the offices and facilities, etc. And again, all that data is there in front of you. Another interesting one to have a quick look at is waste and water. Again, water usage, these are not covered in the small business calculator. So here is where you can do that per office and facility, the type of waste, etc. And you get these drop downs, which will populate and allow you to choose how it was dealt with. Water, the same, both wastewater and water supply. Fugitive GHG is another thing which is captured here, but not in the smaller business calculator, and can be quite a large source of emissions for larger offices. So this is all the emissions from these offices in terms of their air conditioning and refrigeration for the gases that are used in their systems, which are often forgotten, but actually can more often than not have a significant impact. Between 10 and 25% of a business direct emissions or emissions full stop will be these. Lastly, there is information here for leased assets. So you'll see there's a bit of repetition here. Both fuel, electricity, and heat and steam are here, and they're also earlier on for the company's owned assets. this is where these tabs here are for leased assets. So you can, if you are leasing assets, you can put that information here. Last but not least, there is all of the spend-based stuff can be dealt with here. So every spend from every office can be recorded here. And so, yeah, again, you simply say we have got, say we've got some materials being purchased in Italy, in the Italian office, and we'll say it's glass and glass products, and 12,000 spent on that. Then that will immediately tell you what the impact of that purchase has been. Last but not least, the data methodology tells you a bit about how each of these, all of the emission factors which are used in the sheets, where they've come from, and if you need to have a look at those references, you can. Again, full traceability through this tool. And the very last thing to say is that we've got this forum here called Equipoise Plus. You can come here, ask questions. We had a question today about how to correctly measure a managed office. So that information will get put here. We'll have events announced here, such as this one, for example, here. And there's also instructional videos and additional guidance on things, so you can always go and find out more. That's it from me. Thanks very much for listening and for coming along today. I look forward to your questions, and just remains to pass along to our friends at Emitwise, Ian, to talk through their Scope 3 calculator.
Thank you, Pat. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So coming to the last calculator of the day, just to briefly introduce Emitwise, we've been a carbon accounting software for the past 5-6 years, serving generally large enterprises and their supply chains. We built a solution focused on supporting suppliers and SMEs in our customer supply chains, and that's a solution that we're now offering through the SME Climate Hub. So today I'll spend the rest of the presentation just going through the platform and walking you through it, and answering any questions at the end. So I'll just share my screen now. Perfect. You should be able to see my screen. I'll start quickly, just to guide you through the process of getting to the calculator. Once you click in, you'll arrive to the landing page on the Emitwise website. Here in this landing page, you'll be able to scroll down to register, and you will also you'll also find the demo of the same demo that I'm going to do today, recorded here so that you can refer to it if you have any questions after, or there's anything that you've missed. And also we've added some frequently asked questions here. As you'll see in the product, there's other sections for you to get support and for you to ask questions. So first of all, we'll click and register now. You'll have to fill in your details, and then once you fill in the details, you'll be landing onto the Emitwise product. This product currently now has some demonstration data. When you arrive here, it will be empty. So I'm going to briefly walk you through the different steps of the product so that you can use it correctly. Initially, you'll have the option to edit your company information, including the start of the end date of your financial year, and also details about your industry. We use this to calculate the emissions for your specific financial years, and in the platform you can add and calculate emissions for multiple financial years. So this, you'll be able to use it then for tracking purposes, and we'll also use the industry data to assess whether the emissions for your size company and your industry are aligned with certain guidelines, to make sure that the data that's being provided is of high data quality. As you can see here, you'll be able to add historical years and calculate emissions for historical years, which you will then be able to compare year on year in some of the analysis dashboards that you'll see further down in the demo. So feel free to add as many years as you want, and calculate emissions for as many years as you want, because this will give you a better understanding of how you're progressing with time, and also from tracking targets perspective, you'll be able to see whether you're aligning with the targets or with 2050 net zero requirements. So I'll just briefly go down here. The first thing that you'll be asked to input is the company's annual turnover or revenue. This information is generally used for the data quality. All the data that goes through Emitwise will run through some data quality checks, and we will do some data quality checks to assess whether the emissions that have been calculated for your organizations are inside specific boundaries. And we'll use this data to then, as you can see here, calculate an emissions intensity for your organization that you can then use and share with your customers. If you have customers asking you for your emissions, you'll be able to share your emissions intensity with them so that they can calculate the emissions of the products that they purchase with you. Then to the more important part of the product here, you'll be able to basically calculate your emissions. On one side, you'll be able to upload pre-calculated emissions. So if you're calculating, quantity-based emissions for certain categories using another solution or using one of the tools that you've just seen today, you're able to input those numbers into the platform for the purpose of tracking. But more importantly, where you want to measure your Scope 3 emissions, we've built a spend-based automated calculator that will analyze your spend data, so all your expenses, to select the most appropriate emission factors. So I'll walk you through that process here. Basically, you'll be greeted with some additional information. At any point in time, if you have any questions, you can reach out to support@emitwise.com and the team will be able to support you. You can also visit the Support Academy, which I'll show you just in a second. Similar to the one that Pat was showing you, we also have a small academy where you can look into specific details about the product and the solution. I'll just briefly go back. Sorry about that. So basically, you can also use our template here that you'll see. Just check out our template. This is just a short example of it. Basically, what the system requires to calculate emissions is details about how much you're spending, in what currency you're spending, in what country, if you're a multi-country organization, and a description of the expense of what you're buying. So you can drag and drop as many expenses as you want. The system will go line by line, analyzing the data. You don't have to change the currencies. The system will automatically switch currencies and also adjust for inflation if you're calculating years that are further behind. So you don't need to worry about that. The system will automatically do those calculations for you. And then at the end, will give you the relevant output. How it works is that you can basically just drag and drop your expenses or your spend file into the product. You'll be greeted by this part of the solution, which is basically what it does. It analyzes the data that you've provided and it allocates the headings of the specific columns. It's taking a bit to load, sorry. If you use the same titles as our template, it will happen automatically. If you use your own download from your accounting system or from your procurement system, you might have different titles for the information, so you might need to do that matching yourself. And basically then it will analyze the file for errors. If it does detect any errors, it will show it to you. You'll be able to update it directly here on the platform and then ingest the data for calculation. Once you click import, all the procurement data will go into the Emitwise calculator, and basically for each transaction, we will allocate a product or a service classification and the associated emission factor using the same database as Equipoise's tool. We use Exiobase. We'll choose an emission factor for Exiobase based on the data that you've provided and also the location where you're purchasing it, and we'll calculate the emissions automatically for you. As you see here, you'll be able to see a high-level breakdown, but more importantly, what you need to do is come to the section of the product called Analyze Emissions, and here you'll be greeted with a more advanced dashboard that will allow you to visualize your emissions with further granularity and further breakdowns. At any point in time, as you can see here, you can compare to previous years. You can also download the data, and this will download all the raw calculations. You can even just download the graphs and the chart data so that you can use it in your own presentations or reports or external or sharing externally with stakeholders. And more importantly, this will be with your data, so you're able to analyze it as you wish. You'll also be able to filter out for specific activities, for specific scopes, and really focus on what the hotspots are. And before I finish, I also wanted to show you that we have some functionality in the product, and you'll have access to all of this, especially around targets. So you can set, if you've already set targets, you can add them to the product and track them. If you haven't set targets, you have also access to this section called target tracking, where you can come in and create your own targets. They can be short-term, long-term, net zero targets, depending on the ones that you're working. Or even if you've never set them before, you can play around with numbers, and basically you can say, okay, I want to align with science. I want to use this year of data, and I want to see if I can, and you've got the data that you can play around to see the progression. The more data that you have on the platform, and the more years of data, the modeling of your reductions will become more accurate, and you'll be able to better track whether you are getting closer to the target. I'll just finish with saying that you have other access to other parts of the product, like a product carbon footprinting tool, that if you want to test, you can test it, but also from the purpose of targets and decarbonization, which is increasingly important for companies and SMEs. You have access to a section where you can find examples of decarbonization initiatives that could be interesting to your organization. Those initiatives have links to specific public case studies about them, where you'll be able to find more detail about other companies that have implemented them. So feel free to use those as you see fit. You can even also add your own initiatives to track them in the platform if you're currently doing yourself any other things like installing renewables, switching to LEDs, whatever that might be. Perfect. So I think I'll finish right there, and I'll open the room for questions. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone. So I'm hoping everyone now has a better understanding of the climate carbon calculator offering we have on the SME Climate Hub, and a bit of idea of how they differ, which ones might be suitable for yourselves. But yeah, very happy. Please do carry on putting questions in the Q&A, and we're going to go through them now and start answering some. I'm going to start off with one that was actually answered in the chat, but just to confirm that all of these measuring tools are in fact free. You will not suddenly be asked to pay after a certain amount of emissions calculations or bombarded with things to further services and whatnot. So they are completely free to use. Everything we have on the SME Climate Hub is free to use. So that's probably an important question to get out of the way early. The next, there's a couple of questions I can see around whether it considers different countries' emission factors and how that works depending on the country they're in. I assume these are referring to the small business carbon calculator and advanced business carbon calculator, but I'll ask Pat to come in on that, but Ian, feel free to come in afterwards on the Emitwise one. The reason I'm asking Pat to come in on the small business carbon calculator is because Equipoise very much built and developed that on behalf of the SME Climate Hub as well. So Pat, do you want to come in and maybe cover those questions around different countries and the emission factors?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a good specific question. So with all carbon accounting, there tends to be a bit of a divide between in methodology where you're either using the US EPA approach or a UK based approach, which doesn't necessarily mean you don't get emission factors from other places, but it means that the categorization of the emissions is done that way. So the first thing to note is that both tools, the small and the advanced calculators, are fully internationalized, covering, if I remember rightly, 56 countries. And And what that means is that you get local grid factors, which is one of the most important emission factors. So those have been sourced for the countries specifically. But then you also get, you can have emission factors which are appropriate for those countries applied potentially from other sources, because not every country has a government which has been so forward thinking as to release specific emission factors. So for example, in many cases in Canada, I saw a question come in, you can simply use the EPA emission factors, and the calculators do that by default. Likewise, in Australia and New Zealand, for example, they simply use the UK-based and republish UK-based emission factors for travel and things like that. So as these things get more advanced and more granular, the calculators will start to use those things, but at the moment that's how it works. And according to the GHG protocol, that's perfectly valid as an approach. So if you do have any specific questions, always free to ask on Equipoise Plus if you've got something really specific you'd like to understand about how this is done. Also, if you click through into the methodology, all of this does get covered too. So you can see in the documentation some of the real detail of that. You can even click through to the sources of the data. So yeah, really great question, but that's how that internationalization works.
Great. Thank you, Pat. Hopefully that clears it up for people. There's quite a few more questions in here now. One on how likely will a company be to pass limited assurance using these tools if needed? I'm going to let people come on each of the individual tools. I'd say for the small business carbon calculator, it's very much meant as like a starting point. It's not auditable, for example. It's meant to start a conversation to help you start building understanding of your emissions as well. And we are looking online to see how you could incorporate some of it into your reporting tool. So you've also got a reporting tool in the hub, as Lydia touched on. But it's more meant as like a starting point to help start the conversation within your business, and you begin to understand where some of your hotspots are. Pat and Ian, I don't know if maybe Pat first answer this for the advanced business carbon calculator, then Ian on the scope 3 one.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and another great question. So yeah, and I'll cover benchmarking as well, and other sort of frameworks that are out there. Be that SBTI, be that name a 3 or 4 letter acronym. So the tools are based on the GHG protocol, on which all the other frameworks are built. So that's the first thing to know, is that these are valid assessments according to the GHG protocol. In terms of auditing, the advanced calculator is designed specifically for this. It's one of the reasons why we worked with the SME Climate Hub to release this, was because there is a real lack of these in the marketplace. Tools which actually show you everything that's going on under the bonnet, so that someone who is auditing them can see everything, and you can see it as well. Internally, you can query these things, and it's all upfront and open. So yeah, it's a firm recommend for if you do have requirements for auditing. And increasingly more and more folk do. The advanced calculator, really is a good place for you to start on that journey once you've if you're ready to. So yeah, it's hopefully everything you need for that sort of thing.
Maybe I'll jump in from the Emitwise perspective. So the calculations on the Emitwise platform do go through data quality review, but not all the calculations, not all this line item transactions will be reviewed. So we would recommend, if you do want to go through limited assurance, that you download the data and ensure that the automated system has correctly allocated the certain emission factors, or if not, make those specific changes, and so that you can send it to the auditors. But we do have a lot of companies that use the data, review it, and then look to pass limited assurance.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's another question from Kate on, is the data privately held? For example, the revenue disclosure has been an issue for some of our suppliers. So I think it'd be good to answer this for maybe all of the calculators. But I think so for the small business carbon calculator, all the data is completely private. It will never be shared by anyone by anyone within the SME Climate Hub, and we have a standard data sharing, a data GDPR agreements and stuff that you would sign up to when accessing it, but it's very much privately held. And then Pat, you may talk it through for the advanced business carbon calculator, or the answer is yes, it is.
Yeah. Indeed. In fact, I mean, one of the reasons that we went down the path of creating a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet-based approach, is that Google obviously has extremely good data protection, and the methodology we use is to very literally have you own the data. So when you create your version of the sheet, you are creating it in your own Google environment that only you have access to, and so your data is as protected as it would be with any of Google's enterprise level tools. So yeah, quite literally, we cannot see your data unless you choose to share it back with us, which a couple of folk do because they want to have some help or something like that. But all of your data, be it revenue, employee data, be it the emissions themselves, they are all held by you in your Google account.
Maybe I'll just jump in from the Emitwise perspective and seeing Kate's message. If I've understood it correctly, when you are engaging your own suppliers, the revenue data typically is a point of conflict from disclosure. From the Emitwise perspective, all the data is owned by the supplier. So the supplier has the decision to share the data or not. The revenue data, in any case, is never shared with anyone. Even if you choose to share your data with one of your customers, the revenue data will remain anonymous, and you will only share your emissions data. That's usually the request that your customers will have. On the Emitwise platform as well, if potentially any customers were to request your data, you would receive a little email and a message saying if you're willing to share it or not, and you have the decision always to share it or not.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Another question that Pat, I think you flagged you'll answer, is around distance traveled. So how do you calculate that when you have a high amount of travel across the team and only amounts paid as a reference?
Yeah, it's a common one, this one, and unfortunately, so when you look at paid emission factors, there is no travel in paid emission factors, no human travel considered in there, other than if it's aligned with some industry sector. So you cannot use a spend-based calculation to calculate business travel in any of the available spend-based data sets. So unfortunately, what that leaves you with is really the need to record the information. I would say as a first step, because what usually happens here is when companies realize this, they start recording the data. So as a first step, I think it's a case of one-off trying to get as good a possible estimate, and hopefully you can pull that together from different team members to say, look, we just need to once do this for a year, and then from now on, we're going to start to record it. Because it is, generally speaking, one of the largest emission categories, and so it is important to actually record that data. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not an easy answer, that one. So yeah, unfortunately, it is a case of going and seeking that data. And if needed, trying to fill the gaps in with assumptions initially, and then hopefully getting better over time.
Wonderful. And there's another question around working from home and how is this factored into the calculations, and do these tools account for emissions that are produced by employees working from home? Pat, do you want to take that one as well? Because you'll be
great. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a great question. So there was over the course of the pandemic, which is everyone's favorite topic, but the one good thing that came out of that from an emission estimation perspective was that home working became something that was sort of started to do properly. There is a white paper called EcoAct, which was done with a number of people collaborating with a consultancy to pull that together. Those emissions factors are now published by at least 3 governments. So we've got the UK, the US, and New Zealand, bless their souls, have actually started releasing officially the government have released emission factors. We at Equipoise have used the same model that is being used for those government issued ones, using the same EcoAct methodology to then assess that across all of the countries that are covered in the calculators. So they are there with the same methodology, and you will get, if you put in the detail about your number of employees and the amount of remote working, you will get an answer for each of those countries at a granular level.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then there's a top question above about how can I calculate how close my business is to reaching net zero? Lydia, would you like to take this?
Yeah, I can at least give a kind of basic answer. So I think typically when you set a net zero target, you would have a base year where you're starting off from. Then you have a target year where you're aiming to get to net zero from. And then as you go along, you'll be tracking your actual emissions. I think Ian showed a graph at the end of his session that kind of shows it. And so you basically have that base year where you start with this kind of big amount of emissions, your net zero target year, which could be, say, 2040, for example. And then over time, you track how you're doing against that. So the expectation is that your emissions are going down, maybe not perfectly every year, but they're going down overall. And then the way you'd say I'm at net zero, if you were looking at things like our SME Climate Hub, our SME Climate Hub commitment, or SBTIs, having an SBTI target would be that you would, by your net zero target year, you'd be expecting to have decreased your emissions by 90%. And then you would be expecting to have maybe around 10%. It can vary between different sectors about how far you can push your emissions down, but that you would be expecting to have, say, around 10% of residual emissions. And those, if you'd managed to cut your emissions by 90% and then you were left with that kind of 10% of residual emissions, those you can then offset, because sometimes those are ones that just can't be got rid of at that time. So that's when all of those different things allow you to sort of offset those emissions.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, there's been a couple of comments asking for a link to the working from home emission factor white paper. So if we could pop that in the link, or we could perhaps circulate that alongside the slides and the recording as well. There's also a question for local grid factors as well. Ian, I can see you're typing on that. Do you want to take that one live instead?
I was just going to type on that one from the Emitwise perspective. We don't have Mexico's NARA EFs integrated into the platform, sadly.
Yeah, and likewise, nor do we. We do use climate transparencies reports, which I'm afraid I don't know specifically for Mexico whether climate transparency used SEMNORAT. I suspect they may have. So I could do some homework and come back on that one.
Yeah, and just to build on that, if there are additional features that you're interested in, the SME Climate Hub will be reaching out to users to see if people would like to build those into the tools. If there's an immediate requirement, like you need it tomorrow, as I mentioned in my slides, we do have other versions of paid carbon calculator tools, which are a lot more flexible and can include specific grid factors or previous years. So if that is a really burning requirement, please get in touch with myself or Pat, and we can help you with that.
Wonderful. Excellent. So I think we've answered all the questions now. If we just go to the last slide, I just want to say basically thank you to everyone for coming along and being so interested in measuring and understanding your business emissions. It's the crucial first step to reaching net zero. So just thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers as well and everyone that came along and shared. Like I said, we're very happy with the achievement to offer like 3 free carbon calculators. Hopefully, which are all easy and intuitive to use and will save businesses time as well. But yeah, if there are any follow-up questions, then please do get in touch on the via the details there. So if anything for the small business carbon calculator or the SME Climate Hub more in general, please feel free to reach out to me. Anything for the advanced business carbon calculator, reach out to Pat. And then any questions with the Emitwise tool, there's an email address there for their support inbox as well.